It all depends what you mean by that. But if we assume that by soul we referring to a kind of unchanging identity, which is somehow connected with the body, but not of the body, not as it were physical, then one would be positing something like the Christian doctrine of the soul, or perhaps in Indian terms, something like the Atman, the indwelling presence of the universal spirit of Brahman. We don't believe in that, because in fact we see that merely as a philosophical elaboration of self-clinging, of the emotional as well as intellectual conviction that there is something unchanging, either in our body or in our mind, which is like an owner of experience, which does not change from moment to moment, which remains what it is at all times. It is that very clinging to self which sets us against the world, because as Dharmakirti says, where there is the clinging to self, there is also the notion of other. So it's a kind of root of our fundamental dividedness from reality, from the world, to cling to such a notion. So if soul means that type of opinion and that type of cherishing emotion based upon that opinion, we do not accept it. In fact, we subject to interrogation by reasoning and analysis to find that there is no such entity in any of our five aggregates: our form, that is our body, our sensations, our perceptions, formations, that is say mental factors, or even the apprehending consciousness itself. None of them is actually permanent, autonomous and singular, which would be the characteristics of such a true self if it indeed existed. So as we cannot find it anywhere when we look, as it were, into the totality of what we are from moment to moment and what the world is, we must conclude there is no such self. Now, if one says, in that case, Buddhism is merely materialist philosophy because you reject the soul, no, of course not. Because, as I've said a number of times, we do not deny the reality of consciousness. In fact, consciousness is the one thing that from which all the appearances of the world actually arise. It's simply that consciousness is not a thing, not a box, not a static entity, but consciousness is this stream, this process of awareness. So to reject the soul or the Atman is to reject a restricted, shrunk down version of what we are. But it is not to put in its place an even more shrunken version, that is to say, we're merely matter. So we're neither theist, nor are we materialist. There's one final point. We do believe, of course, there's kind of a vitality about living beings, a kind of a force about them. It's a conditioned thing. It comes, as it were, along in the process of becoming alive. There's this kind of, so we could say, kind of a life force or vitality and so on, and that can be strengthened or diminished by appropriate conditions. But it is not a self or anything. It is just as it were a faculty possessed temporarily in this by living beings. But it is not a soul or a self.